This is the SmallmouthCrush podcast. If you're a hardcore angler, you've come to the right place. This is a weekly podcast that will interview some of the top smallmouth bass anglers in North America. Travis and his guest will discuss what it takes to consistently catch big smallmouth, and you'll get a glimpse inside the mind of a trophy smallmouth angler. And now, here's your host of the SmallmouthCrush podcast, Travis Manson.
Hello, it's Travis Manson with the SmallmouthCrush podcast. I want to take a moment to talk about our fine sponsors of this podcast. It's The Real Shot, back in my home state of Wisconsin. Pretty big tackle store. They got a lot going on over there. If you're in the area, I encourage you to check them out. If you're from out of state and you want to see the selection, their online store is amazing. www.therealshot.com is where you can find all your bass fishing tackle needs. And of course, if you look in the show description, you're going to find a link. If you use that link, it just helps out the channel, helps out the podcast. Let them know Smallmouth Crush sent you. Another great product, the Monster Bass Box, okay? This box here is full of amazing baits that you're going to get at your doorstep, shipped to you every month. MonsterBass.com is the website. You can use the code Travis10 right now to get a little discount on your first purchase over at Monster Bass. Also want to give a shout out to Bowers Marine, my dealer when it comes to bass boats, although they have a wide variety of different boats that they sell. Second oldest nitro tracker dealer in the country. That's where I get my Nitro Z21s. They're also a Ranger dealer. So if you're in the market for a new boat, I encourage you to head on over to their website or stop in the store and tell them Smallmouth Crush sent you. Yo, welcome to the Smallmouth Crush podcast. My name is Travis Manson. I hope everybody's having a great week. I'm super excited for this one. I have professional bass angler Grae Buck is going to be joining us. And he actually is a local boy, not too far from where I live. And he's a heck of a smallmouth fisherman. Dominates a certain lake in upstate New York, which we're going to definitely get into because he's got some secrets we got to uncover. We got to get in the head of Grae Buck and find out just how does he do it on Oneida. I can't wait for this one. So we're going to be bringing him in. All right, guys, as promised, here he is, Grae Buck. What's going on, man?
Oh, not much. Getting ready for the season coming up here. I'm ready to go catch some smallmouth.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's going to be a really exciting show for everybody. You are definitely dialed in. I was hinting a little bit at the intro of this podcast. There's a specific lake in upstate New York that you pretty much dominate, dude, and would love to talk about that. But first and foremost, let's get a little bit about your background. Tell the viewers, listeners that are on this podcast a little bit about yourself, what you're fishing now.
I fish the MLF Pro Circuit. It's going to be my 5th year in 2021, so I'm excited for that. Everything's
5 years?
Yeah, how about that?
Whoa.
Yeah.
We're getting old, dude.
How about it? I think it was 2014 we were camping up at Champlain.
Right.
I met you, and it's flown by. So,
wow.
Yeah, I guess that's a good thing. Still fishing on the pro level, so
sure.
Everything seems to be going in the right direction. The last 2 years have been getting much, much better from aspect and just catching fish down south because, as a lot of guys know, I fished up in New York and Maryland and all that growing up, but I didn't really fish south of Virginia until my first year on the FLW Pro Circuit, and it's just there's definitely a learning curve. You don't go down to those giant reservoirs and figure out how to catch them right away.
Sure.
Yeah, to change all that. So it's all coming together, and now I just get to enjoy when I come up north and know I have a shot at doing well in all those tournaments.
Sure. Now, you grew up in Pennsylvania pretty much all your life.
Yep.
What would be your home bodies of water growing up or places that you fished?
Yeah, so I guess the Chesapeake is the closest place that's good that I go to that they'll have tournaments and stuff at. It's about an hour and a half from where I grew up and where I live now. I don't consider it a place I know the best. Just I haven't fished any bigger tournaments like multi-day tournaments down there. So I've never really taken the time to just go down there. I don't figure it all out. I just go down there and fun fish a lot of times, hop on a boat with a buddy and do little team deals. Oneida's, that's as close to a home lake as I would consider. It's not that I go there a lot, but I know it the best out of anywhere that I
Sure. When did you start fishing Oneida?
I was 16. The first year I fished, it was called Peace Valley Bass Anglers. It's a local club. I would just hop in the back of anybody's boat that would take me. And his name was GJ with the first year that I went up there. And that was the first time I ever caught smallmouth other than out of like the Perkiomen Creek or whatever creek around our house. That felt like a 12-inch one. You're like pumped and jacked up. When I went up there and caught a 3-pound smallmouth and realized like what that was, I was hooked. I was like, that's all I wanted to catch it.
So as far as Oneida goes, you started fishing when you were 16, fell in love with the place. I know you're good up on the Great Lakes as well, Lake Ontario. I think your first, I would call a major win would be on the BFL side of things was up there a number of years ago. Do you have any other Great Lakes experience? I know now that you've been on tour, have you fished all the Great Lakes?
Yeah, so actually this year I had the Pro Circuit event on Lake Erie out of Sandusky. That was my first time fishing out of there. I fished St. Clair in the past, and after we had Sturgeon Bay as well for our championship. After that, my wife and I, we did a trip. We went up and checked out Pictured Rocks on Lake Superior. I made it a goal to catch a smallmouth out of every Great Lake this year.
Sure.
I already hit 3 of them, and I was able to pick one off at Superior. He was like a 4-pounder. It took me I didn't have long to fish. I only had probably 3 hours. But I was able to go up shallow and catch one on a jerkbait. So that was
sure.
It was like a 4-pounder, so it made for a good picture. And I was able to check that one off, and then I only had a little bit of time at Huron as well.
What do you mean? Why such little time? 4 hours you go up to Superior and you got 4 hours to fish?
Yeah, that place. I couldn't find them out deep. It was the middle of the summer, and the water's still like 64. I think the temperature.
Sure.
I was like, I don't know if they should be out deep or up shallow or what the deal was.
It's intimidating up there.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, I grew up in Wisconsin, and I've never fished Superior yet.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's from where I lived. Lake Michigan was right there, and so driving 5 hours northwest, even things like the Mississippi River, I just did not have a lot of opportunity to head over and fish as much as I. How would you describe Superior from some of the other Great Lakes? Like, walk me through like the whole setup there.
So when I went there, like I said, we went to that national, or what's it called, Pictured Rocks National Park or National.
Okay.
Park, and that was what we went out on the boat for. I had it because we just got finished the FLW title championship on Lake Michigan there. So up and we went to see the shoreline from the boat. So we went out there, and then I was like, well, we're out here. We got to go fishing.
Sure.
And it drops off super quick, and it was very deep. I don't remember how deep it was, but as soon as you got off the bank, it was 100 feet in a lot of it or more. And I was looking around trying to find some shoals, and I found a couple out there, and I idled over them, and I marked some fish, but I'm not convinced they were smallmouth. Usually when you find them like that, you drop on them, you catch them right away.
Sure.
And these ones, they weren't biting, so that was why I ended up going up shallow. I found just a rock strip on some sandy bank there. It was in 5 foot of water, and off of it. I didn't see the fish before, but I was just throwing around it.
Sure.
Got them.
How was the clarity of water up there? Was it pretty clean?
Yeah, it was super clear.
That's what I hear.
30 foot or more that I could see down.
Wow. I'm assuming it's got to be one of the clearer of all the Great Lakes, I would think.
Yeah, it was clearer than Ontario for sure.
Sure.
Which that one you can see 20 foot on a and maybe more if it's real flat and sunny. But it was definitely a different sort of water body.
Sure. So as a smallmouth angler, what do you consider your strengths as far as techniques, things like that? What would be your go-to, your confidence technique, if you will?
I throw a drop shot the most for smallmouth. Just it doesn't matter if you're on Oneida fishing that shallow water, or my preference is to go up to the Great Lakes, and any of them you can go out there and get in that 20 to 40 foot. And when you can see them I use Lowrance, you can see them on your electronics, you idle around, mark them, and then spin around, drop on them. It's hard to beat that.
Sure.
I really think that's why I'm willing to put the time into idling, and that's what helps find those fish.
See, then that's the theme. It seems, we've talked with a lot of anglers that fish the Great Lakes and trying to locate those fish. A lot of it's seat time and idling and graphing, basically.
Yeah, people wonder how you put 300 hours on a motor in a year, and it happens real quick when you start doing that. You always have to watch out if you're trying to sell your boat. People out there with 300, 400 hours on it.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. They start freaking out. Guys, it's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay. There's still a warranty on the thing. You can buy
Yeah,
it, right?
exactly. That's what I keep trying to tell everybody too.
It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. So you love drop shotting. There's a lot of things I want to talk about. I really am interested in your experience on Oneida Lake. For people that are not familiar with Oneida, can you kind of describe that lake in your mind? What are some things you like about it? Some of the struggles that you have there. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so Oneida, it sets up east to west is how it lays out. It's not a finger lake, but it kind of sets up as the thumb, they call it, of them. And it's shallow, like 25 foot's a real deep spot there. And most of would that be west end's even shallower than that. You get out in 14, 15, that's about where it maxes out. So it fishes different. You can't go out there and just graft the fish up. I found that over the years that I think there's 2 or 3 times I've ever gone out there and idled over a school of them and really and like up around and catch them. It just doesn't work that way. And what I've done, which goes back to that idling, is I've spent hours and hours idling with that Lowrance there, and I have every rock strip, every grass line, which changes year to year, but marked. And what it really comes down to is each time I'm there for a tournament, I catch them off a different spot. It's not like I have one spot that's just magical. I go catch them every time. I figure out this week they're in 6 to 8 foot on a rocky line with a little bit of grass on it. And I got so many of those marked throughout the lake. If you get a rotation going, you eventually figure out which ones they're on, and you can hit all those, and you'll hit them multiple times throughout the day. And those fish just keep pulling up. And
Sure.
they're just up there. They're eating the crayfish, the gobies that are in there, which is what's making those smallies so much bigger now. Because you used to have some largemouth in your bag to win, but like when I won that open, I had 5 smallmouth every single day, and it's how I catch them.
Right. I think over the years, people may not be familiar with the lake, but they really were bait fish oriented for quite a number of years. It seemed like some popular patterns and ways to just have an unbelievable day would be throwing top water and chasing birds and chasing these massive schools that just roamed offshore. And in my opinion, you just don't see that like you used to. Would you agree?
100%. That lake has changed so much over even the past 3 to 5 years is where you've really seen that. Like you used to chase the birds, like you were saying, and you would off in the distance 2-3 miles, you go run over there and quick throw a topwater into the middle of them and hope you beat everybody else to them because you only had about 5 seconds to get there before everybody ran over top of the fish.
Sure.
But those fish look down now instead of looking up. See it.
And I think they're getting a little bit bigger.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I caught a 5-pounder in the summer yet up there, but I've had a couple that were big 4s. The one BFL that I won, I guess 2 years ago, like 20 minutes left in the day, I caught a 412 and one big bass, and that was the one that pushed me up over. I think I had 18 in that one.
Sure.
And we're going to see a 20-pound bag of smallies come out of there. And I guess it hasn't happened yet, but we're going to see it more consistently during the summer, come in the next few years.
Sure.
But also, I never fished it when they used to say you used to go out there and catch 50 to 100 of them in a day. I never got to experience that in Oneida. That must have been before.
Yeah.
Or 16. So.
Yeah, that was my first time on Oneida was 2000 and I believe it was 12. And 2011, 2012, and there was numbers for sure. Not big. I mean, 3.5 was a huge smallmouth at that time back in the day. But now since the gobies were introduced, they're feeding more bottom-oriented baits. They're eating gobies like crazy, and they're getting fat. So I think there's good things to come to Oneida. Some of these events are some of these big tournaments that we fish up there are during like the worst times of the summer, right? Super hot, algae blooms, things like that. So there's a lot of challenges. One thing I found about Oneida is the pressure too. I mean, how do you go into an event or try to catch a bunch of fish knowing that there's 150, 200 boats on that lake practicing that week?
Oh yeah, it messes them up for sure. Because if you go up there at a time when there isn't a tournament, like I help with Kurt Dove. He runs it's called his pro bass class up there, camp. And when we go up there with those kids, we hammer them. And it's a week where there's nobody out there. And those smallies are all pushed up. They're tight to some sort of structure, and they're ready to eat. But once you have guys, especially for those opens, you got guys practice for 2 weeks before for whatever reason, and it just it doesn't handle it well because it's not a big lake. It's only, I think, 22 miles long, and that's where you just kind of have to have that rotation because a lot of those fish will pull up, eat, pull back down, and they just kind of keep moving. And as you get on top of them, it just slides them off those areas, and they stop eating because of it.
Sure. So, what advice would you give someone that's just, an inland lake? I mean, we can say like Oneida, where there's some scattered rock, there's some grass. Like, where do you start? It's such an intimidating place. Do you start shallow? Do you start deep? I mean, what advice would you give someone that's just trying to catch a few fish and learn a little bit?
A lot of those inland lakes have those pin buoy markers marking the shoals. Start around them because there's a reason they're marking the rock is what they're doing, so you don't hit it.
Mm-hmm.
But the rock's not just shallow where you're going to be running into it. It's also those like rock veins. They're like glacial deposits. Is all it is, and those fish will just be all around that because that's where those gobies and crayfish live. So that's if somebody was going to Oneida or any of those lakes like that, or Champlain even, that's what I first key in on.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You just kind of work the buoys. There's a lot of marker buoys out there. A lot of lower units have been lost in that lake. So you definitely want to avoid running over them, but you definitely want to fish them.
Yes, exactly. That's the key is not running into them. I haven't got one in Oneida, but I've got them at other lakes.
Sure.
So it's part of it. You just got to watch what you're doing.
I tell you, Oneida is for me, as far as getting some scratch marks in the hull of my boat. That happens more than I like to admit on that lake, especially in years when you have low water. And let's say you want to have a little fun and target largemouth and get up real shallow. Sometimes that can be, it sucks sometimes. I'm sure we've all been there.
Yeah. At some point, I'm going to figure out how to catch one big largemouth there a day. And
sure.
Real good shape fishing up there, but I haven't figured that out, how to consistently go up there and catch a 4-pound plus fish.
So you have, is it numerous BFL wins plus an open on
Oneida? Won two BFLs there and the open.
Okay. So, and you're saying it wasn't always the same spots or areas, there's always a different type of situation, depth range, things like that. So let's say you have a tournament. Let's say there's an event this summer up there. Where would you start, or how would you form a game plan for practice leading into that event?
It just depends on time of year. So in June, like the end of June, we used to have those opens up there. Those fish would actually be out on usually like that deeper side, like around 10 foot or so, which for Oneida deep. And they're just post spawn usually then. So those fish are looking to eat, but they're not either up shallow or out way deep yet. They're on those grass lines a lot. During this like heat of the summer, that'll usually push them onto that deeper rock. It's you got to get out there and you just have to figure out that range. Like I said, sometimes they're in 10 to 12, sometimes it's 6 to 8. It just you have to figure it out that week almost. It doesn't seem to be completely consistent.
Sure.
It's hard to answer that question though that way.
Right. So you just kind of go out, you're using your side image. Is that what you're relying on most, at least when you're looking for stuff to fish? Correct.
So I idled, I think the north end of South Shore, basically 3/4 of the way down the lake. And I have all that rock marked from 2 foot all the way out to like 14.
Mm-hmm.
The depth range I'm usually sticking in between. And it changes year to year, like we were talking about before, the grass. So the grass plays a big key in that. When those fish are sometimes keying on the perch fry, they get the perch fry more in that grass edges. So if you can figure out if they're in the milfoil, sometimes it'll be in that cabbagey stuff that grows up there. You can find that. This past season, the milfoil didn't grow nearly as well as it has in the past.
Okay.
So I wasn't able to key in on that as much because a lot of times I don't like to fish that. And that gives you a chance at catching a largemouth every once in a while mixed in.
Sure. So if you find that, so you're looking for patches of milfoil, or is it a real defined edge?
Defined edge is the best if you can find it, because usually that means it butts right up to the edge of the rock, and that's where it stops growing because it's hard down there. but it can be patches. That's fine. It's got to be a little bit of structure because those smallies will get in it just like a largemouth would.
Sure.
I've had plenty of times where I go out there with like a 3/4 ounce weight. You can actually flip them up and you put it down real quick. That I throw that Z-Man, that turbo crawl.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a crayfish flying past their face, and they just react to it really quick. And you would think you're punching or flipping for largemouth, but you catch smallies, and that's fun. When you set the hook on one of those, and they freak out when you hook them.
So what is your go-to technique for that situation? Obviously we just talked about you're flipping some of that with a heavier weight. Are you going up to like an ounce sometimes, or do you want that reaction bite, or are you looking a little less weight?
Yeah, I usually go like at the 3/4 when I'm fishing between that 5 and 10 foot range.
Okay.
It's for the reaction. I feel like if you go up to an ounce, you would still get them, but with the smallmouth, how small their mouth is, you'll blow their mouth open too much.
Sure.
Won't get them then. So that's why I usually go 3/4. Sometimes I'll go half if you want to slow it down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, that's for fishing the grass. A lot of times I'll throw, I'm going up for you, that Z-Man, that's the minnow. That's the 3-inch one. And I like to roll that around on those edges as well.
Yes.
It's called bad chat. So it looks like either an alewife up there, or I'll throw a green pumpkin one to look more like a perch.
Is that the minnows or the diesel? That's the
minnows. Yeah. I like this guy. He's a little one. They can eat that real quick. And
yeah, we don't really talk about that one, buddy. No, it catches them. It does. Man. That's a good one. It works. It works, guys.
You want to see the other one I throw up there a lot?
Yeah, absolutely.
I throw that. This is what I won that tournament. I was throwing a drop shot, and then this guy played a big
in the perch color.
Perfect perch. I love that color up there.
Wow.
I don't know if the color actually matters as much if it's looking like a perch or if it looks like it got a little bit of a goby deal, I guess.
It does.
But that's that Hayabusa. It's a brush easy. It's called. That's a 1/13 ounce. So that's the heaviest. I'm sorry, 1/10 ounce. That's the heaviest one they make. But it's got these little guards, so it'll come through the rock just a little bit better. It just rolls over. It doesn't get hung up, and that combination there, I've won a lot of money on that sucker.
Sure. So that head that's made by Z-Man as well?
Nah, this one's Hayabusa. Yeah.
Okay.
If I go with a heavier weight, like if you're throwing like a 5th or something, that's when I'll throw the Z-Man stuff. They got like the Ned locks.
Absolutely.
But for the real light one, when you want that slow glide, because I think that's a lot of times those smallies, you make a long cast with that, and it just glides real slow down there, and then get up before it hits the bottom. Okay, it's called the Brush Easy.
Brush Easy.
Yeah. Here.
Okay.
I even brought a pack of lemon.
There it is. Perfect, guys. So the Brush Easy, and the company is?
Hayabusa.
Okay.
Yeah, Japanese company. I've been with them for probably 3 or 4 years now.
Sure. No, that's interesting. I do like that. So what he's showing here for everyone that's listening to the podcast, it's basically a real light, fine.
They got little monofilament brush guards on it.
Okay. Yeah, monofilament. Yep.
Off each side, there's 2 of them. So
okay.
They're super light. You can see
they'll fold over when that fish bites it. Yep. And he's throwing that on like a small Ned rig, like a TRD. Yeah, that's killer right there. Yeah,
and this is actually last year when I won that tournament on Oneida. Earlier in the year, I was down at Cherokee Lake and I was catching those spawning smallies, and we couldn't see them. But this is what I took every time. I would just pitch it into the rocks that those fish were spawning in.
Sure.
The first time I really used it, and I realized how good it was. So
it's
worth picking some up. They work great on. I fish the Susquehanna every once in a while with a buddy, and it's so light it flutters right over top of the rocks a lot, so you can drift it in the current when it's cold.
Right.
But, no, that's a killer little jig head.
Yeah, so when you're in rocky conditions, when you're in even some sparse grass, okay, that's going to really come into play, especially if you're getting hung up on the bottom. A lot of times, in my opinion, when I'm throwing the net, I want to go with the lightest weight possible, but still feel good bottom contact. And unfortunately, a lot of times when you fish smallmouth in big water, we got a lot of wind. So sometimes you have to go to a little heavier head, and that's when that Z-Man Ned locks comes in for you. Just that heavier.
That's exactly it. That lightest weight you can get away with, how you were saying. But since Hayabusa doesn't make a heavier head there, that's where I go with that Ned locks. And they got a great hook in that Z-Man one.
Absolutely.
Nice and strong. You don't have to worry about straightening them out, even if you hook in a 6-pound smallie.
No, I cannot find a better setup right now for Ned rigging or any of the soft finesse plastics. That works well with, it pairs well with other brands as well as the Z-Man brand. You know, Z-Man's great because of the durability, of course. It's very buoyant, but sometimes it's hard to thread that plastic through there. And I think that Ned Locks, what he's holding up, has a little bit of weight on the shank of the hook, which allows you to push that bait up in there. And you have to be patient, right? When you're threading those on, you want them straight. At least for me, I can't throw a crooked bait, right? So you got to take your time, and that holds that plastic on there real well once you get it up there.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. I can show you the difference between that Ned Locks and the Hayabusa. What's good about the Hayabusa one, they got little, like, they're sharper, like they're pointed, you can see.
Sure.
And that, it's actually even easier to thread on than the Z-Man one is.
Oh, wow.
Because they're so sharp, it pops on there and it clicks right on.
It grabs it.
Like got the lead that's ribbed. So it takes a little bit, but both of them, once you get it on there, they stay. But a lot of other companies, you got that big metal barb they stick off the side of it, and that's when you're like fighting it, trying to get the elastic. Like, it's so stretchy, it sticks to everything when it's grabbing when you're going in there. So
sure,
getting it straight, like you said, that's very important, because if you don't, it doesn't get the natural glide out of it. Then it's like kind of like spiraling, and it just doesn't look like what they want.
So is it safe to say for lakes like Oneida, northern bodies of water, somewhat shallow compared to some other places that has the grass and rock, is your number one go-to technique? Is that going to be something on the bottom like a Ned? Are you throwing anything else?
I throw that. It's usually I have two rods that'll be on my deck. I'll have the Ned for getting it on the bottom, and then I'll have the drop shot set up just off the bottom. And
sure,
it just depends on what you're exactly trying to mimic. And this day to day, those smallmouth, they're finicky. They want to eat down. Sometimes they just want to come over and eat it.
Sure. So with the Ned rig, so we're on Oneida. We're out there. We're trying to find some fish. We're looking for some clean bottom, some rock, and maybe some grass here and there. You're throwing the Ned. What's the setup as far as rod and reel when you are throwing that Ned rig setup?
Yeah,
and line as well.
Sure. I throw a favorite rod and reel. It's the jackhammer. I like the 741. It's a medium heavy, they call it, but it's more of a medium action. It's got enough backbone, but it's got plenty of tip that you can actually whip this guy out there, because you need that to be able to make those long casts. And I think very important with this is you got to get a long cast, get it away from the boat. It's usually days when it's flat there, because it seems like Oneida, it's either dead flat and it's really hard to get them to bite, or it's blowing like crazy and you can't feel the bottom.
Sure.
That's why I like that 741. Like I said, it's a jackhammer. I use the size 2500 reel for this spinning reel.
Okay.
And I have like a braid. It's Seagar. It's the 30-pound Smackdown.
Okay.
Ash green. So when you make that long cast with this, you don't necessarily feel it hit the bottom every time, just because it's such a light head. But you can see that braid, it'll be floating a little bit, and you'll see it hop. And that's when you know one of those fish grabbed it. But to that braid, I'll tie on. Usually, it's either 8 or 10-pound fluorocarbon. I like Seagar for that as well. I use the Tatsu. It's just real high-quality fluorocarbon. They can't see it. It's got a good abrasion resistance, because you got zebra mussels down in those rocks. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to be getting your line all frayed up and then hooking one of the smallmouth when it starts coming up and jumping. You're going to end up breaking them off. So I pay attention to that line, because it's usually 4 inches of it in front of there is where that's going to have the marks on your line from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that high vis braid.
Yeah.
Is that like yellow, or what color is it?
It's bright green. It's almost like
bright green.
I don't know. You're probably not gonna be able to see this.
Yeah, we can see a little bit. So it's a bright green.
Yeah, so it's bright green. I use either the 20 or 30-pound. I actually use 20 more so now. It changes year to year. But,
sure.
Like that way, it just casts a little bit further, and that's kind of the setup. And then I tie that together. I use an Alberto knot, or crazy Alberto knot, to rig them together. It just makes it real small. It's super simple. I know a lot of guys like that FG knot, and it's just, I can't tie it as quickly on the water. So, and I've never had that one break on me.
Right.
Fishing, so it's hard for me to switch because
why switch if it's working for you?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to keep talking about that line, but it piqued my interest because I've been on the quest for the perfect high vis line, and it seems like for me, because I fish so much and I'm out there all the time, and I like, braid's expensive, of course. Uh, every brand I've tried, it just seems to fade after a while. Like within a couple weeks, it turns to just nastiness. I mean, does that hold up pretty good for you?
That one does. It holds up very well because I've had the same issue with using some of the other companies.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to find one you like them that really, like you said, either holds up to that or some of them become like flossy and they start like, it's like threads. I don't know. I don't like them. That one's been good. What I also like to do, it comes with a spool. It's usually 150 yards. So I'll put half of it on there. And then when I go to change the line, I'll actually reel it onto one of my other rods so you can flip it because you never use all 75 yards of that.
Right. Yep.
On there. So you get like 2 times the amount of use out of it then.
Sure. Now, as far as other baits, so we talked about drop shotting. We talked about the Ned. Are you throwing any type of jigs at all or anything like that?
Not a whole lot. I'll throw a little football jig every once in a while. I catch them decent on that. It just usually when those tournaments are going on, there's so much pressure, like we were talking about, that they're kind of finicky, and you can't up there and just lean into them. Like everybody wants to go and just lay the hammer to them, but when you can flip them, like it's fun when you catch them that way. But
right,
the tournament situation, I don't throw that as much.
So you're just going with that sneak approach, real finesse approach. It's a pressured body of water. There's a lot of people out there fishing that week.
Yeah,
and those fish feel that pressure.
Yeah, no, like I said, these three I use that Z-Man trick shot for my drop.
Okay.
That the minnows.
Yep.
Covering some water, and that TRD, and they're the 3 like heavy hitters for me. I
sure.
Punch that grass a little bit, but they're the 3 I like, and this is a confidence thing at this point.
Exactly. As far as that drop shot, so what size weight are you normally going to throw with that drop shot, as well as the length of the leader from the drop shot to the hook? Do you vary that much?
Yeah, I'll change that. This one, I kind of tied it up smaller so you guys could see it completely.
Sure.
It's between 12 and 18 inches, I would say, is my usual go-to. It's not real exact. You can adjust it up and down throughout the day just to see.
Yep.
I'll go longer if you're fishing current, say up St. Lawrence and you're dragging behind the boat. Then you want to go up to 2 feet just because instead of presenting it vertically like that, it's leaning like this. So
sure.
You got to make sure you're keeping that bait in front of their face as much as possible. But I throw, that's called angler tungsten. That's the weight I use. I like that. You can see it's got a gray color to it. A lot of them are shiny.
Yeah.
Silver. I know. I can't tell you how many times I've been top of fish.
I know where you're going with this.
They freaking bite that weight, and you set the hook, and you don't have a weight anymore. And
sure.
It might be good in certain situations where it catches their eye to get them looking at your bait, but I really like this. I like the teardrop if I can get away with it, fishing the rock.
Sure.
This more surface area, you really feel the bait. If I'm I'll throw the like straight cylinder ones when I'm fishing around grass. It just comes through that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So what Grae did was he held up the drop shot weight that was more of a teardrop. Basically, what you're trying to do is get a better feel for the bottom. You can feel a little bit more. Then that the cylinder weight is more. You think it comes through grass a little bit better, and that's when you're going to apply that. Yeah,
like St. Clair would be a perfect example for that.
Sure.
Cylinder up there because there's no rock on the bottom for the most part, and you're just fishing around the grass patches.
Mm-hmm. And are you always throwing tungsten? Do you mess with lead anymore?
No, I throw tungsten all the time. Just
sure.
Bottom contact. It's really important to me, and that's why I want to fish. But I go Oneida, I'll throw a 1/4 ounce one typically around there. If it gets real windy, you'll go heavier. When I'm on the Great Lakes, that's 3/8 or a 1/2 ounce.
Sure. So Grae, as far as your strengths when it comes to being a great smallmouth angler, where do you think that lies in? What would be your top? This is what I'm good at, and I have extreme confidence in doing it.
Graphing with my Lowrance Electronics, I think that's the biggest player in it all because you got to trust that you're finding the right rock. You got to trust that you're finding what are actually bass down there. So just the combination of that. Smallmouth, they're typically not that smart. When you find them, you can usually catch them, and it's just a matter of finding them. So if you put those hours in, idling with your mercury, it's just you find those fish, you find the bass, and you catch them.
I agree. I agree. What are some weaknesses, some areas that you wish you could improve on? I know there's a lot of different techniques out there. There's some different types of fisheries. I mean, even a smallmouth fishery in the south is way different than the north. Where are some areas that, or maybe even just a technique? I don't know. I'm just picking one. Carolina rigging. We know it's effective. Maybe you don't do it as much as you should. I mean, what are some examples?
There's plenty of things I need to get better at with that way. Carolina rig, I can throw it, I can catch them on it. Have a lot of trouble hooking them a lot of times. I'm not sure what that whole deal is, but
Sure.
I would say one that I wish I could get better at, I've worked at it, is fishing up shallow when you can see those fish cruising. I don't know if I get too close to them a lot of times, and then that's why they're not wanting to bite. But if I could get better at picking those ones off, because a lot of times the biggest fish are up shallow on the Great Lakes, and you'll see them cruising on a sand flat, and you'll bomb either whatever your Ned rig out there, throw a spy beat past their head, a hair jig, whatever you want to throw. And I feel like I should be able to catch more of them than I do. So maybe you could teach me.
Man, it's I wish. So that technique is very. I don't know. Those fish are moody up shallow.
Mm-hmm.
One day you can have one sitting right underneath your boat, drop to, and it's going to bite like it's never seen a bait or care that you're there. And the next fish is going to want nothing to do with it, and you'll see him and you'll follow him you'll stalk him for 70 yards, and he's just not going to bite. So that's a challenging pattern. It's a fun pattern. It's almost like hunting, and I found that every Great Lakes is different too. Meaning on Lake Ontario, I'm hunting more for a single fish, where Lake Michigan, I can roll up on some shallow flats and there's hundreds of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
Probably a good time.
it's fun. It's fun, but it really depends on the area that you're fishing, the pressure a little bit. Sometimes you have to get sneaky with bait presentation. Maybe try to track that fish and see what direction he's swimming, and toss a bait out of view, but hoping he's going to swim near that, and then at the right moment, give that little Ned rig a little shake, and he sees that movement, comes up and grabs it. I mean, there's so much that goes into it, and of course, you have to have the right conditions. A lot of times you want to go up shallow, and Mother Nature says, "No, it's not going to happen today. We're going to give you a lot of cloud cover and some big waves. So good luck with that." Obviously sunny conditions, dead calm. That's a pattern that's available on lakes, even inland lakes like Oneida at times. Now, I know there's a lot of algae bloom, but if you have the right conditions on Oneida and you get some clear water, you can certainly see some of those fish. Now, they're very skittish, but one good thing is at least you can maybe see where they're concentrating, and you can come back, or maybe just make a real long cast to areas that where those fish are when they're super, super shallow.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a pattern that's truly hit or miss, and not something that you oftentimes can depend on when it matters, in an actual tournament.
Yeah. No, like you said, it's very hit or miss, because I had one of the best days I've ever had. It was up shallow. There's a giant boulder in probably 6 foot of water, and they were sitting on the shady side. It was dead flat out there. I was up fishing on Ontario with my wife, and she pitches in there, hooks one, pulls it off. And there was 8 of them that
Sure
came off. We caught every single one of them.
Yeah.
Silly. I've gone back to that boulder. They're there every time. You catch maybe 1, maybe 2 off of it, and maybe it's the same fish that were there all the time. Maybe they just live there. And
yeah, I don't know. Those single boulders out there are sometimes real special.
no, but single boulders, shallow or deep, they're always a special thing to find.
Sure. What would be your favorite time of year to fish for smallmouth, and then what technique are you utilizing for that scenario?
I like the late summer when they group up, maybe even early fall, when they're out in that 20 to 40 foot range, and they're just stacked together. And this year I got to experience that up on the Thousand Islands there. I think it was first week of October. So it was starting to cool off, but it was still warm out. And they're so tight together, and I was drop shotting on them. I idled around, found where those fish were. And I threw a blade bait a little bit on them, just kind of playing with it. And I was trying to get more confidence is what I was doing with it.
Sure.
And I caught some big fish. I lost. I'm not sure if it was a bass or not. I hooked this one. I'm fighting it. And it was taking forever to come up. And I fought for 2-3 minutes. And I got it halfway up out of that 40 foot of water.
Uh-huh.
Down there, it's just shaking its head like real. It kind of felt like a giant walleye. As soon as it pulled off, I lost it. It pulled off. My blade bait, I started to catch back up to it. I had a 3.5 pound smallie I landed.
Wow.
Pitching there again, I caught a 6 pound smallie.
Oh.
Yeah, so that really started messing with my head. And
Sure.
I break 7 in the worst way. I haven't got a 7 pounder yet.
Well, that's my next question. What is your biggest personal best smallmouth?
Yeah, so I caught that this year, and it was actually that same day. It wasn't on that spot. I went to another area, and I idled around. I found a group of just a little wolf pack. There was probably 8 of them, and they were in 40 foot of water. And I got on top of them. It was dead flat out there, and that's where I took this that drop shot.
Yep.
I dropped it down there, and I had to work them for probably 10 minutes before I finally got one of them to bite, and it was 670. And
wow, yeah.
Biggest one I've caught so far. I've had a couple other ones that were 6.5, but it's a special fish. Like, when you get them that,
anything over 6, man, they look different. They got these foreheads on them. They got
they get
pectoral fins. Yeah, it's crazy. It's a rush. Those giant smallmouth. There's nothing like it. And it for anglers like you and I that we fish these big bodies of water. We see these big fish. I mean, when you're fun fishing, you're not really impressed with a 4-pounder anymore.
No,
you're going right. But you're going after those big smallmouth. So you were in 40 feet of water. You drop shot it on them. It took a while to get them to bite. Did you catch any others, or was that it?
No, I couldn't ever get any more of them to go. And that's one of those deals where I don't think it was windy enough. It didn't have enough current moving in the water. So they were just kind of sitting down there suspended. They didn't want to eat. You put that, I was throwing that Z-Man trick shot. I like that color. It's Goby Bryant, it's called.
Yep.
Just Gobies down there. And I held it there long enough, and I figured out to get that one to bite, I had to stop moving it. I just had to hold it there.
Sure.
And just kind of dead stick it, and eventually one picked it up.
Yep.
But those fish, they all looked like the same size on the graph, and I'm sure one of them was over 7.
Right.
Have you
out there?
Have you broke 7 yet?
Yeah. My biggest is 8 even out of Sturgeon Bay. That was a number of years ago.
Okay.
I'd like to think that there's definitely a bunch of big fish, big state records swimming around the Great Lakes. I mean, there's got to be 1,000 swimming in Lake Ontario right now. It's just a matter of time. Somebody's going to catch them. They're just, there's a 9-pounder out there.
Oh yeah, definitely. It will happen sooner or later. Those gobies just keep putting too much weight on them.
Sure. No, I agree. Now, if you could have one bait to use, like, I'm going to just say, okay, you get to go smallmouth fishing, but you can only use one bait. What are you bringing out with you?
I'd probably go with the TRD then.
Sure.
There, because I can drop shot that. I can throw it on a Ned rig. You could skip it under a dock if you want to throw it weightless. It's super versatile. If I was doing that, I might actually bump it up to the 4-inch version of it.
The big TRD?
Yeah, because if you're only giving me one, I can cut that down, still make it a 3-inch.
There you go.
Or versatility out of it.
All right, let's go one step further. It can only be one color.
The deal.
Really?
Yeah, I like that. It's got the green pumpkin top and the pearl bottom.
Sure.
Mimics either a perch, a lot of shad down south. They throw that color all over the place down there. I either have that perfect perch, or I usually actually have this end the deal on when I'm fishing in Oneida.
Sure. Now, as far as we talked a lot about northern fisheries, what has been your experience now? You've been on tour for a number of years. Southern smallmouth fisheries, what are some places down south that you fell in love with that are some really good bodies of water that you fish for smallmouth? And how would you kind of the difference between the two fisheries?
They're completely different fish. That's to start off with. Fish up north, they like sunny and wind, but the sun's key. You go down south, you want the nastiest, coldest, miserable days you can get, and those smallmouth start chewing. I've experienced that on Cumberland. Where else have I been? Dale Hollow, I went to with Becker the one time for like 3 hours before. We went to go for like 3 hours. It was like 30 degrees out. It was breaking ice out of our guides. We ended up staying like 8. It was sleeting, but those fish were just chewing, and we couldn't
Wow.
because of it. And we figured out a little deal there where you could go into those like hollows that came in each like drainage ditch sort of deal.
Sure.
You'd throw a jerkbait or a shaky head in there, and there was fish in every single one of them. And
Right.
it was so patterned. It was silly. And then we got to take that over to Cumberland. It was similar. We caught bigger ones in Cumberland, which was kind of neat.
Did you? Yeah.
I haven't fished Pickwick. I'd like to go to Pickwick, try to catch one of those, like you see, catch 8-pounders down there.
Yeah. Tennessee River. Sure.
Can't think of anywhere else down. I guess Cherokee was very good. We were there. We hit that perfect for the spawn. The fish were pulling up to us, and I was one of the first people to figure that out. There's probably 3 or 4 that figured it out the first day, and then after that, everybody started beating the bank. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
but that was a really neat place. They weren't as big there, but there's a lot of them.
Sure. As far as how they fight, was there a difference?
No, they jumped a lot. They don't get that goby fat on them.
Sure.
That's a difference there. They need to take some of them down south. I think get some real fish.
Yeah, quiet. Don't do that. But I agree. The gobies have really been the number one reason why we're seeing such big fish up here in the north part of the country. I mean, growing season's small, short windows for them. A 5-pounder's legibly what, 10, 12 years old, they say. I don't know how to prove that, but that's what you hear. I mean, those are some old fish that are living out there. Smart, they've seen a lot. They've been through a lot. As far as, what do you think separates some of the top anglers like yourself when it comes to being successful at smallmouth fishing? I ask this with every guest. What makes that individual, that angler, be so consistent?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I think a lot of it goes back to trusting your electronics, because if you don't trust what you're seeing, you're not going to be around the fish. And that's the biggest thing is if you know they're on rock, or if you know they're on grass, or you just have to go find them out just fishing off the end of a shoal. If you know where they're at, you're going to catch them. If you don't, it's just hard for people, I guess, that have, say, like a southerner coming up north for the first time to catch one. Mm-hmm. To realistically trust that you can just go out there and idle all day and find where those fish are, and that you might spend 12 hours idling, you'll find 3 groups of them.
Right.
Not it.
You might not find any that day.
That's true too. And it's the same thing when I go down south and I go and start idling ledges. I don't going down there, and I don't commit to it enough. And I think it's just the biggest. Like, you have the commitment to that technique and go all in with it.
Sure. So it sounds like the confidence and the experience with that is really what separates somebody from.
Because it's not a bait thing. It doesn't matter what you're using. If you know them on it, if you put it in front of their face, I think most of the time those fish like to eat it.
So I got to ask, why do you dominate on Oneida so much? Like, there's a lot of good northern sticks that fish these tournaments, yet you're winning them all, it seems. Like, how does that, there's got to be a lot of pressure, for one, right? I mean,
on me?
On you.
Nah.
No?
No, I don't we're just going fishing. It's a good time.
Really? All right. I mean, I would think, man, I've won 3 events here in recent years, and I got another big one. I better show up. You don't feel any of that. You just go out, do your thing.
There's no place I feel more confident I'm going to go out there and catch. If you can catch 15 pounds every single day, if in a multi-day tournament, it's going to get you a top 10 there.
Sure.
And that's what it comes down to. I feel like I can go out there every day. My goal is to catch 5 fish over 3 pounds, and I want to hopefully catch 2 that are a little bit bigger. You get between 3.5 and 4 pounds, you're in really good shape.
Right.
And that's all it really comes down to. I love that place, and I've spent a lot of time there. A funny story with that is the year, I guess before this one, I wanted to go up there in the spring and start idling a little bit, check some areas out that I haven't fished before. But I like to get up there before that grass grows.
Sure.
You can see the rock a little bit clearer. And I'm texting my buddy. It was in April, and there was still ice on Oneida at the time. I'm like, do you think the ice is going to be off this weekend? It was the night before I was going to fish the last day at Cherokee, and I was in 3rd place, I think, at the time. So I had a chance of winning like a major tournament, but I just couldn't get my mind off Oneida. Like, I knew I was going to win that tournament that year. Like, it was just one of the things, like everything. I don't know. That year I was just obsessed with that place, and that's all I wanted to do was win. And
sure.
PFL months before that, and then I won this one. And I don't know. If you're obsessed with something anywhere, you figure it out.
Right. Yeah, that's you brought up a good point. When you want to use your electronics, and I know some guys might not like us talking about this, but you know what? This is the Smallmouth Crush podcast where we hold nothing back. One of the best ways to learn that body of water, especially a Finger Lake or a place that has a lot of grass, is if you can graph that in the colder months when that grass isn't as thick.
Yeah,
because you're going to see a lot more with your electronics. Now, of course, dedication. You're not picking up a rod, right? You're driving up north to go sit in a boat for 12 hours looking on a graph. That doesn't sound like fun, but that's what it takes sometimes.
Like trailmen too.
Right.
They're not fun days, but you got to put the work in for it. And it's the same thing with any of the tournaments I go in pre-practice. There are very few times I have rods out on the deck because it doesn't do you any good to catch them a month, 2 months before.
I know, but it's so much fun.
Yeah. I guess that part is true, but it depends on if you're thinking it was a fun trip or is it a job at that time.
That's true.
Gotta go to work sometimes, I guess.
That's true. Well, awesome. Hey, I appreciate you joining me. We learned a lot of great tips. Anyone that wants to check out more information on you as far as social media, how can they find you? What's the best way?
Yeah, it's all Grae Buck Fishing. So it's on Instagram, Facebook, and I have a YouTube channel that I've been playing with for the last couple of years. That it's grown a little bit. I got video recaps of every tournament I do.
Sure.
See a bunch of fish get caught. I try to teach some little techniques. Right now, I'm working on like a tackle storage tips, is what I call it, for the winter months.
Okay.
Kind of showing how I set up each box, why I like setting it up that way, and best way to keep all your stuff organized. But if you check any of that out, that's awesome. I appreciate you following along. And
yeah, definitely. We're going to have all that information in the show notes below for anyone who's interested. And again, thanks, Grae. Good luck this coming season. And I have a feeling there's going to be another big event up on Oneida in 2021. So we'll see.
Let's see what happens.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening today. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show and follow us on Instagram at SmallmouthCrush. Also, the YouTube channel, SmallmouthCrush. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating and comment with a review below. And as always, until next time, we'll see you on the water.